Welcome back to our podcast. We're excited to have you with us for another episode where we break down key construction materials and methods. Today, we're taking a deep dive into a material that has been shaping the way we build light gauge steel frame construction. It's strong, durable, and versatile, but like any construction method, it has its own unique set of benefits and challenges.
For sure. If you've ever wondered how buildings can be framed without using traditional wood studs, or why steel framing is becoming more popular in both residential and commercial construction, then this episode is for you. Light gauge steel offers some major advantages, like being fire resistant and non susceptible to termites or rot. But it also has considerations like insulation and cost that builders and designers need to account for.
And that's why we're dedicating this episode to understanding light gauge steel from the ground up. We'll start with the basics, what it is and how it is made, before moving into how it's used in framing for walls, floors, and roof. Then we'll explore some of its other applications, the best ways to insulate and finish steel frame structures, and of course the pros and cons of using this material. And we can forget about building codes. There are specific guidelines in place to ensure safety and performance, and we'll be covering those too.
Whether you're studying construction, working on the field, or just curious about different building methods, this episode will give you a solid understanding of light gauge steel and its role in modern construction. We'll be breaking everything down in a structured and easy to follow way, so by the end of this episode, you'll have a clear picture of why this material is used, where it works best, and what to keep in mind if you're considering it for a project.
So, let's jump right in and start with the fundamentals. What exactly is light gauge steel construction, and how does it compare to traditional wood frame?
Okay, so first things first. The segment one is what is light gauge steel in construction. Light gauge steel construction is a framing method that uses thin sheets of steel, which are cold formed to create structural components like studs, joints, and tracks. The steel is manufactured to ASTM standard A1003. Unlike traditional wood framing, steel framing is non-combustible and resistant to termites and rot.
Yeah, so for wall, floor, and roof framing, steel is actually formed into a C-shaped studs or joists, which have holes at 2 feet intervals to allow wiring, piping, and bracing to pass through. Track sections are used horizontally and sit as top and bottom plates with the studs in between them. Channel sections are used for lighter bracing and framing tasks.
Load-bearing members are used for roof and floor framing of walls supporting floor roofs, and framing supporting exterior cladding systems. For non-load-bearing members, they are used to frame walls that don't support floor or roof loads like interior partitions. And light gauge steel members are identified using standard nomenclature, which includes member depth, letter designation for the shape, member width, and metal thickness. Light gauge steel members are usually joined using self-drilling screws, welding, or pneumatically driven pins.
Okay, so we have the segment 2, which is the light gauge steel framing. Now that we understand the concept, let's talk about framing. Light gauge steel framing is similar to wood framing, but instead of wooden studs and joints, builders use steel components.
To start off, the ground is framed with studs or joints. Mastic adhesive is applied to the upper edges of the joists, and structural wood panels are laid down and screwed to the upper flanges of joists. Then the wall frames can be made, and the sequence repeats for each floor. In situations where the building is supposed to be non-combustible, floors are made of corrugated steel decking with concrete topping, or precast concrete, and exterior walls are sheathed with gypsum panels.
So, because light gauge steel members are more prone to twisting than wood counterparts, more attention is given to bracing and bridging. This includes steel straps or channels that are passed through punched openings in studs and welded or screwed to an angle clip at each stud. Diagonal steel straps are also used for lateral bracing.
Also, steel web stiffeners are used to prevent joists from buckling, which are usually needed when vertical forces must pass through floor joists. This usually happens where load-bearing studs sit on the edge of the floor platform. Other elements like subflooring, wall sheeting, and interior finish materials contribute to buckling, twisting, and lateral wind and earthquake loads.
So for the next section, it's going to talk about the other uses of light gauge steel framing.
So, light gauge steel is also used for construct components of fire-resistant buildings, such as framing interior partitions and non-load bearing applications, which are known as non-structural metal framing.
Here, light gauge steel studs can be combined with concrete and produce thin but stiff walls panel systems. A 2-inch thick concrete is cast facing the framework of steel studs. The concrete to steel bond and can be created by stud anchors, sheet metal, and shear strips, welded wire reinforcing, or screw to studs.
In load-bearing applications, concrete panels provide shear resistance, and steel provides more resistance to gravity and wind loads, acting perpendicular to the face of the panel. A building where non-combustibility is required, metal and wood framing is mixed, but wood shrinkage must be considered in order to not create unforeseen stresses or damage to the finished materials.
Okay, so we have segment 4, which is insulating light gauge steel frame structures. One challenge with light gauge steel is that it conducts heat and cold more efficiently than wood. So insulation is a critical factor.
Yeah, and for cold regions, light gauge steel frame structures must be insulated correctly to minimize thermal bridging. Without the correct insulation, thermal performance of walls or roofs is reduced, energy losses increase, moisture condensation within the framing within attendant erosions or decay, growth of mold or mildew, and discoloration of finishes may occur.
The first step is adding a layer of continuous insulation, which can consist of a rigid plastic foam or a semi-rigid mineral fiber. It must be placed on either side of the framing members. The preferred location, however, is on the exterior or cold side of the metal components. This keeps components warmer and does a better job of isolating the point of potential thermal bridging.
When the continuous insulation is placed on the interior or warmer side of the framing members, it exposes the metal components to lower temperatures. This increases the risk of condensation within the framing cavity, where steel members extend from the inside to outside the building enclosure. Like the roof, if steel members must be broken and insulating spacers must be inserted. With the right insulation, light gauge steel buildings can be just as energy efficient as traditional wood frame structures.
Okay, so real quick, let's talk about finishes. Since steel framing is so precise, applying drywall and other interior finishes is actually easier compared to wood framing.
And on the exterior, you can use almost any type of finish that are also used in wood construction, like stucco, brick veneer, fiber cement, or metal panels.
Okay, so we have segment 6, which is advantage and disadvantage. Like any material, light gauge steel has its pros and cons. Let's start with the advantage.
Okay, so firstly, it is very versatile and flexible. It requires simple tools, it furnishes internal cavities for building services and thermal insulation, and it accepts a wide range of exterior and interior finish materials.
Steel is also used for non-combustible construction. Its steel framing is also lighter and weight than wood. And don't forget precision. Since steel components are manufactured with tight tolerance, there's less waste compared to good framing.
There's also a difference in spacing steel studs, rafters, and joists that are placed at 24 inches rather than 16 inches with wood studs. Because steel framing is a dry process, it can be carried out in wet or cold weather that can make masonry construction difficult.
But yeah, like we said, there's also its downsides. Steel, for example, steel is more expensive than wood up front, and it requires specialized tools and fasteners. Also, if not properly insulated, steel framing can lead to thermal bridging, which affects energy efficiency.
That's why choosing the right insulation and finishes is crucial. Additionally, masonry walls tend to be more span-proof and much stiffer than steel frame walls.
Finally, let's talk about regulations. Light gauge steel framing must meet specific building codes to ensure safety and structural integrity.
So, the U.S. International Building Code, the IBC, and the International Residential Code, the perdón, hablo español. IRC, si wasn't that hard. Provide guidelines for steel framing, including load-bearing capacities and fire resistance.
Light gauge steel, however, can be can be used in any building construction type. Light gauge steel, however, can be used in any building code construction type. Light gauge steel, however, can be used in any building code construction type because of its non-combustibility.
When it is unprotected, light gauge steel framing tends to lose its strength and stiffness when exposed to heat. However, with protections like gypsum board or plaster, load-bearing light gauge steel assemblies can meet 2-hour fire resistance ratings requirements which is suitable as a structural load-bearing system for any construction type except type 1A.
Yeah. The international
Bien cortadas y todo.
Sí. Ahí voy. Okay, so the International Residential Code for 1 and 2 family dwellings has also incorporated requirements for steel-framed residential construction, which allows builders to design and construct with light gauge steel-framed houses without having to employ an engineer or architect.
Wow, that was a lot to cover. Light gauge steel frame construction is such a fascinating topic, and it's clear that this material plays a significant role in the future of building. From its strength and versatility to its insulation challenges and cost considerations, there is a lot to think about when it comes to using steel framing effectively.
For sure, I think one of the biggest takeaways is that light gauge steel isn't just a replacement for wood. It's a completely different system with its own advantages and requirements. It offers precision, durability, and fire resistance, but at the same time, it demands careful planning, especially when it comes to things like insulation, fasteners, and proper bracing.
And let's not forget about sustainability. Steel is 100% recyclable, which make it an attractive choice for eco-conscious builders. Plus, the fact that it's manufactured with such light tolerance means there's less waste compared to wood framing. But like we discussed, the upfront cost can be higher, and if insulation isn't handled properly, energy efficiency can take a hit. That's why it is so important to weigh the pros and cons and understand how the design will still efficient.
Exactly. The key takeaway here is that while light gauge steel is an amazing option in many cases, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. Whether or not it's the right choice depends on factors like budget, climate, and project requirements. But when used correctly, it can create strong, efficient, and long-lasting structures that meet modern building demands.
And let's not forget the role of building codes. Like we covered earlier, steel framing has to meet specific guidelines to ensure safety and structural integrity. The fact that it can be used in all construction types because of its non-combustibility makes it an extremely flexible option. But it's still crucial to follow proper regulations and fireproofing measures.
And at the end of the day, what makes light gauge steel such an exciting material is its potential. It is already a staple in commercial construction, and with improvements in insulation and cost efficiency, we could start seeing even more residential projects using it in the future. The industry is always evolving, and this is definitely is a material to watch.
Well, that about wraps up today's discussion. We hope this episode gave you a better understanding of light gauge steel framing and all the ways it is used in construction. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss future discussions on construction materials and building methods.
Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next time with another deep dive into the world of construction. Until then, keep learning, keep building, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.